What if the ghost stories you laugh at were true? For friends seeking adventure in a long abundant hotel. Discover that some places don't just stay haunted, they claim you. As the night deepens and shadows stretch, they realize escaping may not be as simple as leaving. The Crest Inn is waiting, and it doesn't let go. Will they make it out? Or will they become part of the hotel's twisted history forever? If you want more chilling real-life haunting, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and share your thoughts in the comments below. The Haunted World. The Haunted Crest Inn.
It was a crisp autumn evening when four college friends, drawn by tales of an old haunted hotel on the outskirts of town, decided to break the monotony of their weekend. The Crest Inn, long abandoned, stood like a ghost itself atop a hill, its grand windows boarded up, its once stately stone facade now crumbling. The stories were endless, strange lights flickering in the windows at night, music playing from an unseen piano, and whispers heard by those who dared approach the building. But the group was determined. They wanted to prove the ghost stories were nothing but exaggerated rumors. The group arrived just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the twisted path that led to the hotel's entrance. Laughter echoed through the cool evening air as they climbed the steps to the front door. It creaked loudly when they pushed it open, as though the house had been waiting for them. Inside, the hotel was silent, save for the distant sound of wind whistling through broken windows. The walls, once decorated with elegant paintings, were now covered in mold and peeling wallpaper. The floorboards groaned beneath their feet as they ventured deeper into the dark lobby, their flashlights dancing over decaying furniture. "Let's head to the ballroom," said Mark, always the one to push the boundaries. "That's where most of the ghost stories come from." The others hesitated but followed, unsure whether they were more excited or afraid. The long hallway stretched out before them, bathed in the flickering light of their flashlights. The silence was suffocating, broken only by their footsteps and occasional laughter, which didn't quite mask the tension in the air. As they reached the ballroom, the atmosphere seemed to change. The temperature dropped several degrees, and the air thickened, like it was harder to breathe. Their laughter died down, replaced by uneasy glances. Mark pushed the double doors open, revealing the grand space inside. Dust had settled over the once beautiful chandeliers, which now swayed gently as though moved by some unseen force. The floor was littered with broken glass, and the walls were adorned with faded paintings of long-dead faces. "I swear I heard something," whispered Sarah, clutching her phone in her shaking hands. "I didn't hear anything," said Jake, trying to sound confident but his voice faltering. "Maybe it's just the wind." They stepped further inside, the floorboards creaking loudly underfoot. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind blew through the room, though there were no open windows. Sarah yelped as a shadow seemed to dart across the far corner of the room. "Did you see that?" she gasped. But before anyone could respond, there was a soft, almost haunting sound, the unmistakable melody of a piano playing in the distance. "It's coming from upstairs," Mark said, his voice trembling now. He turned to look at the others, expecting to see them equally frightened. "Let's check it out." Against their better judgment, they followed him up the grand staircase, which seemed to groan with each step they took. As they reached the second floor, the music grew louder, echoing through the dark, deserted halls. At the end of the corridor, a door stood ajar. The music seemed to spill out from the crack, impossibly clear in the heavy silence. "Okay, that's enough," Jake muttered, his face pale. "We're getting out of here." But Mark was already pushing the door open. The room inside was shrouded in darkness, save for the faint glow of moonlight seeping through the broken window. A grand piano stood in the center of the room, its keys moving by themselves, playing a slow, mournful tune. The walls seemed to pulse with an energy that made their skin crawl. Suddenly, the music stopped. There, standing at the far end of the room, was a figure. A woman. She was dressed in a tattered white gown, her hair hanging loosely around her face. Her eyes were black voids, and her skin was pale, almost translucent. She raised her head slowly and locked eyes with them. "Leave!" she whispered, her voice cold and distant. They froze, unable to move. The air grew colder, and the shadows in the room seemed to grow longer, stretching toward them. Without thinking, Sarah stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Who are you?" The woman tilted her head, her hollow eyes never leaving them. "I was once a guest here, like you. But I never left." The lights flickered violently, and the room seemed to spin. Suddenly, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping them inside. Panic set in. They ran to the door, but it wouldn't budge. The piano began to play again, louder this time, as the woman took slow, deliberate steps toward them. "Why won't you leave?" Sarah screamed, her hands shaking as she tried to open the door. Mark grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "We have to get out of here, now!" But as they turned to leave, the woman's voice echoed through the room. "You cannot escape. You are already part of the hotel. Forever." The ground beneath them shook, and the walls seemed to close in. The cold was unbearable now, as though the very building was alive, suffocating them with its dark presence. Desperately, Jake began to pound on the door again, but it was no use. Their phones flickered, the light dimming as if the battery were being drained by some unseen force. In that moment, Mark noticed something. Behind the woman, in the far corner of the room, a dark shape was beginning to materialize. The shadows twisted and formed a second figure, larger and darker than the first. It was a man, his face hidden in shadow, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "We have to go!" Mark shouted. But before they could react, the woman lunged at them, her hands reaching out like claws. In a final act of desperation, Jake grabbed a broken chair leg and swung it toward the door. The door flew open with a deafening crash, sending the woman stumbling backward. They ran, faster than they had ever run in their lives, not daring to look back as the hotel seemed to groan and shudder in its anger. They stumbled out onto the front steps, gasping for breath, not stopping until they were far away, standing in the cold night air. As they looked back at the Crest Inn, they saw a light flicker in one of the upper windows. A shadow moved behind the curtains. The hotel was still watching. They never spoke about that night again. None of them ever returned to the Crest Inn. But sometimes, when the wind howls just right, they swear they hear the faint notes of a piano playing, in the distance.